bit about Amazon Location Service is Seth Fitzsimmons, Principal Engineer from the Amazon Location Service team. Seth, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're thrilled to have you. This was a launch that was very exciting that we first saw here at reInvent, but I won't steal any of the thunder. I figured we could start with a gentle introduction. So why don't you give us some context on, what is Amazon Location Service? When was it launched? Some of the basics before we dive deeper.
Absolutely. So we launched back in reInvent in the middle of December, and we're providing some location-based services for Amazon customers. And the main reason we did that is that we found that a lot of our customers out there are getting deeper and deeper into where they are, where their customers are, and where their stuff is. And there's been traditionally a pretty complicated process of getting these things integrated into your applications and also integrated into your businesses. So we found that the opportunity to bring those services under the AWS umbrella, so that's common with the AWS billing and all of the other service integrations that are out there, was going to be really valuable. So we've been working on this for a little bit, and we're really excited to have it out in the world and to start hearing what people are doing with it.
Awesome. Yeah, you're hitting on some points that I think we see as a recurring theme as common points of friction, right? Unconsolidated billing, potential friction and improvements that can be made for ease of use. And then I'm sure there's some topics to talk on in the security and the space there. But I figured we could, open up the concept. We hear a service name here like Amazon Location Service, and if me as a naive person, I could assume that could do a whole number of different things potentially. So I figured I'd just let you tell us a little bit about what Amazon Location Service actually does, because I can imagine there's lots of challenges working with location-based data. So I'm curious to see, what were the customer needs that are solved right now using this product.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a bit of an interesting combination because it's the combination of service and data, which is a little bit different from some of the other services that we've got around. So I'll break down the capabilities that we're providing that we launched at reInvent. First, we've got Maps, which is the ability to pull data down onto a desktop or a mobile client and render it so that it provides a canvas, and you can put whatever other kind of spatial data you want on top of it. So that's kind of like a pretty baseline thing. It's a canvas. And then next we've got Places, which combines geocoding, reverse geocoding, and point of interest search. So that's where you can take an address and find out where in the world it is, so you can get geographic coordinates back. Reverse geocoding is going the other way. So given some geographic coordinates, what is the name of that place, or what is the address that it is? And then point of interest search is if you want to go out and search for the Eiffel Tower. Or something like that, and find out where it is so that you can display it on a map. So those two go pretty well together. There's a second pair of capabilities that also work very closely together, and those are tracking and geofencing. Tracking provides the ability for customer devices to publish their locations into AWS, and then customers can go ahead and retrieve those and figure out where their stuff is. But the really neat thing is when you actually combine it with a geofence collection. A geofence is a shape that describes some sort of area in the world that has some sort of relevance to you. Maybe it's an outline around your house or your neighborhood or your city or something along a road or something like that. And by combining the two, you can take data that's being pushed into tracking by your devices and then match it against those geofences and then get events that result from that. So when a device changes its relationship to one of these geofences and enters it or exits it, you'll get an event bridge notification or an event bridge event that can then get plugged into basically anything. And that's actually the part that I'm most excited about. I think that there's some really neat capabilities that can be built on top of that. And one of the things that we're going to be launching in the near future is routing. So between all of those, it enables a bunch of use cases ranging from user engagement and geomarketing, asset tracking, and delivery, and things like that.
These are some really interesting ingredients. Can you go over some examples of the kinds of applications that customers are going to build with these components?
Sure. So maps, since they're really the most basic ingredient, people can and will build anything that's got their own data. Maybe you want to show the national parks you've gone to visit, things like that. Geocoding is incredibly valuable if you've got an existing source of data with addresses in it that hasn't basically been uploaded into or up-leveled into a geospatial context. So you can run all of those addresses through, and then you'll be able to start displaying them on maps, and you'll start to be able to do various spatial operations and things like that. Yeah, tracking and geofencing, like a lot of that is going to be around industrial manufacturing, figuring out where things are, tracking packages, figuring out where your food is if you ordered it, making sure that it's delivered efficiently, that kind of stuff.
Or even a couple of IoT use cases, I imagine, or is that inclusive in the industrial section you mentioned?
Well, I think there's some overlap there. There are a lot of customers that are currently using IoT to track location, but it's not really a first-class thing. It's more something where it's an additional attribute that exists in there, and this builds on top of that to take those locations and plug them into the tracking service so that you can have a dashboard where you can see where your devices are, or you could even start doing things like custom configuration according to which facility they're in.
Yeah, and you mentioned the integration with EventBridge, and then kind of from EventBridge you can branch off into just any other native AWS service. That sounds really interesting. I'd love to hear more about that later.
Absolutely.
But you know, maybe you can tell me a little bit more about the relationship between tracking and geofencing, and how they're related and they're different. I think you described a couple of use cases. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, so the first step is to create, we call it as a tracker resource, and that's a container for the locations of any number of devices, and that will scale with your business or with your needs. And at that point, you can use one of the Amplify SDKs. If you've got mobile phones that are updating devices, we've got some integration guides within the developer guide that show how to take updates that are published through MQTT to IoT and send them out over to location, and then you can go check, see where things are, and then connecting them, you can connect a tracker to one or more geofence collections. So if you've got a geofence collection that corresponds to your manufacturing facilities, another one to your distribution facilities, different modes like that where they're logically defined there, and then you'll end up getting information about which geofences they intersected when you look at what comes out of EventBridge. And yeah, so like the thing that I'm super excited about is being able to archive those geofence geofence events into S3 using Kinesis Data Firehose. That's a pretty neat thing, because then at that point you've got the ability to query it using Redshift, query it using Athena. You can also plug that stuff into SNS, so you can send a text message. I've managed to spam myself when I've been running some simulations here, and just my phone blows up. And you can plug it into a Lambda function. One of the other things that we're thinking is kind of an interesting idea is if you've got a developer cloud instance and you're going to an office. As you approach the office, you intersect the geofence. It sends an event out, runs the Lambda, it turns the EC2 instance on, and it's ready by the time you get to your desk. And then it turns off when you leave, so you can save money that way. So I think there's a lot of different integrations there that can make a lot of different stuff possible.
Wait a second. I want to see if I can build one really cool thing on top of my mind with this feature.
Yeah.
Build something where I open the garage door as I'm near home, and then I close it as I leave.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So it's a way of like kind of plugging into the whole like smart connected home kind of stuff. It's a way of doing that within the AWS ecosystem, but it's not about the smart home anymore. It's about the smart life.
Yeah, and to sort of extend this seems to be a different permutation of trends towards event-driven architectures in software applications, right? We understand that long polling doesn't always work. You simply want to be able to have event triggers, and we understand that very tangibly in our own lives, right? There's a lot of these if this then that scenarios like you described. Like when I'm walking into the office, if I'm walking in, please do this thing, or if I'm walking out, I'd like this thing to be done. And a lot of what unlocks that is not necessarily the mechanism, right? Like these, like Event Bridge to handle these event messages, and Lambda to process any arbitrary compute that you want, have been around. But it seems like the real key here is the geospatial data, right? Like having this accessible through a service to be able to now serve as a condition both on the tracking side and then geofence and the intersection there. It sounds like there's just lots of really creative applications that can be used here. And I'm big on hackathons. I like going and building wild and crazy and impractical applications in a short period of time. And I remember for a while on college campuses, it was very popular to build this idea of like, hey, could I geofence with like maybe the local store or the library, and can I when I walk into the library reserve a seat or see how many people are available automatically, something to that effect. But I'm imagining this can extend even further to things like, hey, I'm walking downtown and I walked within a certain range of a store, and maybe I get served an offer or a coupon or a discount or something to that effect, right? So this sounds very exciting, and the challenge of having access to this data sounds like the exact problem that Amazon Location Service helps to solve here. Am I off base there, or is that pretty fair to say?
That's exactly right. I mean, I think that we call that the geomarketing model, where you can plug it into a service like Pinpoint and extend it out. But yeah, I think that the access to data is really important, because there's actually a lot of friction when you want to get this involved. And when you're using existing data providers and existing service providers, you need to do a lot of that glue code yourself. And just putting it all within AWS is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I hear something that is not just my cat screaming in the background. And if you listen really closely, it sounds like the echoes of someone saying undifferentiated heavy lifting.
Exactly.
And so that is music to my ears, that we have a service that solves that problem. I know Rob is sick of this joke that he doesn't know when it's going to come, but it happens.
Go back and forth on this word all the time. It's a fun word. Thanks, Nick.
Anytime. That's why they pay me. That's what I'm here for, just to make that joke once an episode. But we talked a little bit about what applying this sort of end-to-end looks like. You mentioned using integration with Event Bridge as an event bus, and Lambda to execute application code. Is there anything else there to touch on? Thinking about logging, you mentioned Kinesis Firehose to put some of these events or the archiving locations into S3. Are there any other particular more built out, mature applications that you think are worth mentioning? Because you're the expert here.
Yeah, I think that a lot of large enterprises like to actually understand the performance of their services in real time. And with a lot of the existing solutions, you need to do a lot of that building yourself. So one of the other things that I'm pretty excited about is the integration with CloudWatch, where we surface metrics on a resource level basis, so you can see how things are performing, and also how many people, or not how many people, but how many API calls are actually happening, and which actually segues nicely into CloudTrail. You can see where those API calls are coming from, and which access tokens are in use, and things like that. One thing that I actually want to circle back around to a little bit is the data side, which is the maps and places. We wouldn't be able to do this without data from here in Esri. Esri has been a fantastic launch partner for us, as this year, and they provide just this fantastic understanding of the world in terms of where streets are, where addresses are, things like that. And one thing that I'm also, I think is a neat thing that we're doing is that when you create a maps and a places resource, you get to choose one of those data sources, and you can change that in the future. So if you go ahead and build your application and you decide, Esri's data is great, but I'm starting to work in a new market, and here has some better data there. You can create another resource that uses here. You can switch your application to use a different resource, and the API stays exactly the same. So your code doesn't need to change whatsoever.
Now, if that introduces any changes in billing, is that going to be integrated, or do I have to dig into that myself?
Both of those are the pricing is the same. And you can have a look at the pricing page to get more information about that. But the other great thing is that, yeah, it's integrated into your AWS bill. So you can see what your usage looks like, and you can monitor it using all of the existing billing tools. So you can understand whether you're starting to hit some sort of budget and need to think about re-architecting your application a little bit, taking advantage of some more reactive, event-driven type stuff, that kind of thing.
Now, one thing I wanted to ask about is you mentioned that you log perf data to CloudWatch, and then we can do all sorts of great stuff with it from there on. Can you be a little bit more specific? What are the dimensions that you're measuring with this perf data?
Yeah, so we're measuring the number of API calls per resource. So if you've got one resource that you're using with an Android application, another that you use with an iOS application, you can see the relative amount of traffic to Amazon location through that. And you can also see what the latency looks like for those requests that comes in. So you can say, oh, okay, this is under my threshold. You can start to understand what type of SLAs you're providing to your customers on top of what you're getting from us.
That's really interesting. Yeah, my mind is going to crazy and wacky hackathon projects as it usually does. But knowing the latency on requests for an object that may be in motion, you could do some sort of crazy back of the napkin calculation and try to do interpolation between the API requests to try and have some sort of pseudo real time visualization, right, without having to completely flood the service. So
yeah, for tracking, I think that's really interesting because you can use that as anomaly detection. So if you've got 1,000 devices that are out there that are updating every couple minutes, and the number of updates that you see drops substantially, you know that something is wrong in the field. And you can go like, okay, have they lost internet connectivity? Have their batteries died? All that kind of thing. And if that's a little bit outside your control, you can see what the growth looks like.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's really good that you've thought a lot of this through already. The integration, the billing, the metrics. This sounds like a really mature and well thought out launch. Now, but one thing that we talked about earlier was, Nick mentioned the scenario of like you walk by a store and you get an advertisement. I've always found that kind of experience a little bit creepy. So, that to each their own, I think. But I know that the location services space is, you need to really think really hard about customer privacy and data privacy, that sort of thing. So can you talk a little bit about what your thoughts are there?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that, some of it comes in terms of where people are querying for places, and we make sure that that privacy is respected there. So following GDPR requirements and all of the other compliance regimes. Where that I think gets a little bit more important is around geofencing and especially tracking, because the information about where your device is really important to your business. And if you're already trusting AWS and you're already benefiting from the various compliance and security regimes, it's within your account. The data is encrypted using KMS keys, and it never actually leaves the AWS perimeter. So it's something that you can trust along with the rest of it.
Awesome. Yeah, again, there's always the shared responsibility model. Folks that are used to standard data best practices on AWS should be very familiar with a lot of the things that they should be looking towards here. But as always, managing data in a responsible way and how you're exposing that to other folks at your organization is something that's difficult with no one-size-fits-all approach. But we like to say principle of least permissions is a good starting point, right? Only give people and systems access to the data that they need, and nothing more than that. Even if that's difficult, helps to prevent a lot of messy situations down the line. Now, Rob.
Just to really quickly elaborate on that, the shared security model is something that I think, if you haven't heard of this before, definitely go look it up. This is one of the core foundational operating principles of AWS. And the succinct version of it is that AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud. So in other words, our data centers, physical access, and then some of the stuff that Seth mentioned just now, making sure that data is encrypted at rest, and even giving you mechanisms to encrypt the data at rest. But then security of the cloud, security in the cloud is your responsibility, or at least many components of that, right? So you really want to have that kind of shared responsibility model established well before figuring out some of these data privacy issues, because it'll just help tremendously to understand who owns what and who's responsible for what before this kind of thing becomes a problem.
Yeah, and in that effort of maintaining security in the cloud of that data, there are a number of services, some of which are more recently launched, others which have been around for a while, that can help you sort of track the governance or surface scenarios in which you may have data that is somewhere where it shouldn't be or exposed in a way that it can't. So that's a big rabbit hole we could go down forever, but not the point of this session here. So we'll try and move along, but I'm excited to see this in action a little bit, but something that just jumps out to me is this is a really unique launch for AWS from my perspective. I heard from you, this deep partnership with Esri and here as these data authorities, giving customers that choice to really be able to use which is working best for their, for their use case. And sort of backing that behind, the operational excellence that we see in an AWS service. What you mentioned that there's ways to track data that's used through Amazon location service. I'm just curious, sort of, the last mile problem here, in my opinion, is, okay, I have this data. Maybe I can trigger events with EventBridge, right? But I think I'd be behooved to not ask about like visualization, right? You have this data, maybe you want real-time dashboards, maybe you want to be able to see historical tracking of this data that may have been put into something like S3 for archival purposes. What is really the story there? How can folks sort of tap into that side of the data they use from location service?
Yeah, so a lot of customers are already doing some sort of geospatial data visualization in-house. And they've got their own tools that they're very familiar with and they like. So we are very much taking a meet them where they are approach. So to the extent that we can, we are surfacing things in standardized formats or conventions that are going to be familiar to them. And one example of that is the map data is exposed as what are called MVT tiles, which are it's a vector-based format that gets pulled in tiles so that you get better performance. Don't need to load the whole world in, and those are compatible with libraries like Mapbox.gl and Tangram. And you can then use your own custom map styles. You can add your own custom layers, and we've done a bunch of work with the Amplify team to make that as streamlined as possible. So you may already be using Mapbox.gl to surface some data that's coming out of an API that you've built yourself. And here's an opportunity to just add something else to that without having to rethink everything.
Wait a second, I heard integration with Amplify. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. So Amplify has some location APIs that we're going to drop the links into chat here. And they will help with the process of signing requests. So SIGV4 is something that you shouldn't have to think about. So Amplify takes care of some of that. And then the map library takes care of the rest of it so that it can make requests here. And we've also got some guides within Amplify for how to use tracking from different environments so that you can just kind of do some light configuration in an Android application, and it will start publishing data into tracking. So it's a bit higher than the standard, like the Python or the JavaScript SDK. It's something that's much more focused on the domain here.
Awesome. Yeah, excited to see, more than just prescriptive advice for how to use location service. Again, Amplify being this real force multiplying tool chain for developers. I know extensively used in the mobile space. You talked about Android. Mm-hmm. So exciting to see that. And again, sort of just putting the building blocks in the hands of developers, sort of where they are, right? This data is valuable, but being able to have functional components that they can sort of plug and play with sort of out of the box is a much nicer package, and probably decreases the time to value from when they start looking at this to when it's actually powering tests or betas or whatever they may be building with it. So, hey, I don't know if I'm putting the cart before the horse here, but sort of seeing this in action, thinking about building with it has one question in mind for me, and that's wondering, are we going to get to see Amazon location service today? I know you are the foremost expert here in this room, so if you don't have a demo, I don't think anyone would.
Okay, well, stand by, and I will walk you around the console a little bit. I've probably said that I'm excited about a lot of different things, but there's actually a part of the console that I'm super excited about. It's this interactive tool that we call Explore. And what happens is the first time you go there, what it'll do is it'll create the resources for you so that you can start interacting with them through the console. But because they're standard resources, you can then start interacting with them through an API, and you don't need to go through the process of creating them yourself. So it's going to create a map, it's going to create a place index, it's going to create a geofence collection, it's going to create a tracker, and then I'll show you how those different parts work together. So here, this is our canvas. And we're looking at downtown Vancouver here and lovely Stanley Park. And this is just a way that you can say, oh, hey, it's a map. How does the map work? And this is a proxy for what you could then integrate into your own application. So this is the kind of thing where, okay, well, I've actually got a data set of trees somewhere. I want to drop those in as a layer. It gets a little bit more interesting once we move into places. What I can do is, since we're in Vancouver, we're going to look for some Tim Hortons locations so that we can get some coffee. And this is a visual representation of what you would be getting back from the API. If I click the different pins, they're numbered according to results. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more specific and they're not all Tim Hortons locations, for example, you can then find out, okay, it's going to provide the name of the place, the address, and some additional information about it. Yeah, go ahead. Exactly. Let's click on Stanley Park. We searched for it. There are a number of other Stanley Parks scattered around North America. Yeah, this is the latitude and longitude, the geographic coordinates that you can then start using with other geospatial data to do intersections and other types of stuff and measure distances, for example, or draw shapes. Yep, exactly. Yep. So speaking of drawing on the map, moving over into the geofencing, like what we're going to do here is we're going to say, I want to create some data within Amazon Location Service that we can use with tracking. So I'm going to draw, I'm a big fan of Stanley Park whenever I go up and visit. So I'm going to draw a geofence around it. Yeah. And then we're going to complete it. Cool. There we go. So we've got geofence for there. And then we're also going to put one on Granville Island, which is another nice tourist attraction. Or we'll just actually cover the bridges down here because things get kind of interesting. It's fun to go check out the water taxis and stuff. So now I've got a couple of geofences that now have actually been stored into my account. So these are back there, and you can use this to manage some of your lightweight geofencing needs. And then you can connect them to a tracker. I'm going to click the link a tracker to the geofence collection to see geofence events. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, I'm walking around carrying my mobile phone. And here I am downtown, going to walk around, continuing to walk around. Oh, hey, I've now entered Stanley Park. And this is the event that you would be getting from EventBridge as well. So we get information about the device. So that's this random ID that we've got here. That can be anything you want. And then it's got, again, the geographic coordinates of where that device was when it first intersected with Stanley Park. And we know that it's an enter event. And the geofence ID is the first one I drew, which corresponds to Stanley Park. And those can be your own IDs as well. I'm going to keep walking. Okay, I'm walking through Stanley Park. Okay, I'm now headed out towards English Beach. And I've now exited the geofence. And be like, okay, well, you're not in the park anymore. Maybe it's time for dinner. Do you want some recommendations? So plug this on into some other sort of event bridge consumer. Yeah, and so that's this is a great way to just check out the service and see what the rough capabilities are, and to start sparking some imagination. At that point, you can switch over and you can manage your resources directly. Creating a map will show the different options you've got for map styles. So this is one of the other nice things about meeting customers where they are in terms of client rendering. We're providing the same data, but we provide multiple different styles. So we've got several different styles from Esri that serve different purposes. So navigation on streets, something that's a little bit less navigation-y, a little bit less like a roadmap, but it highlights things that you would find within cities and areas like that. There's also a dark gray canvas and a light gray canvas that are really good for dark and light mode data visualizations when you're taking your own data and putting it on there and symbolizing it in various ways.
One of the smallest things that may just be like easy to brush over, but like actually is a huge quality of life improvement, is when you were drawing the geofences on the map. I think like people may take that for granted, but I remember back when I was building, projects based on geofencing where, each of those points is a vertex of a polygon that, you may have to I've used APIs before where it just asks me for the input of the lat long coordinates of the edges of the polygon. And if you're trying to say like, hey, what are the lat long coordinates of my local park to draw this? Like, it's just an extremely painful task. So to be able to just like in seconds draw exactly what you mean and not have to debug whether your polygon is stretching out in some really weird way. That, again, a small feature it seems, but I know I've done the alternative before, and this is just like orders of magnitude better. So
oh yeah, it's incredibly painful. I mean, so that said, like if you have other data sets that you're producing using ArcGIS or QGIS to draw these things, you can take those and you can import them directly in, and it'll take the GeoJSON geometries, which is a way of describing these in JSON. And you could also, for example, we've been playing around with another experiment where we've taken all of the bus stops in Greater London and created geofences for them. And we used a tool called the Overpass API, which is provided by the OpenStreetMap community, to export all of those things as points. And then we've created a radial geofence around them and loaded them in bulk. So it's kind of nice that you can draw, and then you can also source them from other existing data sets in addition to needing to know what those coordinates are and to put them in the right order and make sure that your polygons are wound the right way, that kind of thing.
One question I have here from seeing this demo. First off, this is really cool, and it kind of it feels like these are very directly connectable to the APIs that you were describing earlier.
Exactly.
But one question I had was, so we have these two data providers with Esri and here, and if we had taken, let's say, that last polygon that you drew, we say, hey, this is my region of interest. I want to know when I have an enter event or an exit event out of this geofence, and then you change the provider, let's say, from Esri to here.
Yeah.
Now I know that certain map providers have a little bit of drift in terms of, how they align certain things, where their landmarks are. Is that going to work seamlessly the way we expect, or are we going to have to go and revisit or apply some sort of transform on the collection of geofences that our app cares about?
Well, typically you would provide some buffer within your geofences. So the differences between the different data sets, they're not going to be as dramatic. And especially the other piece that we haven't really talked about here is the accuracy you can get from a GPS device. Like we would all love to get like centimeter level accuracy, but in reality, in cities, when you've got signals bouncing off of buildings, you're lucky to get on the right side of the street. So you need to be pretty aggressive with the buffering around your geofences to make things work properly.
Yeah. So that exactly the next question I was going to ask was, if I were going to draw a geofence, and what is your recommendation of the resolution of that geofence, and how much buffer should we be using?
Yeah, don't draw super small ones. Yeah, because it's kind of a gamble about whether those would actually get hit or not. I did an adventure race on Sunday, just a short thing in the National Forest around here, and we used a web-based application that allowed you to check into the different checkpoints. And what they did is they had created these checkpoints that were either intersections between forest roads and trails, or in some cases like off-trail destinations, like a tree that is built that is growing on top of a lava rock. And those had about 30-meter resolution. So your GPS would be close enough, and you're like, okay, well, I'm standing 10 feet away from the tree. I'm to the south of the tree. You still want to actually be in that geofence. So something that's about 30 meters is a pretty good rule of thumb. I mean, that's maybe a little bit bigger than you'd want in some cases. But
yeah. And to reiterate here, this is not, determined by limitations in the service. Again, this is some of the fundamental laws of physics, and GPS as a technology sort of at play. So, these are some good best practice for anyone that would be working with geolocation data and using that as a event trigger for anything.
Exactly. I mean, that's one of the things that comes up with tracking all the time. What are we doing to transform the inputs? Well, we're not, because they're your inputs, and we want to make sure that those are coming back out the way that you expect.
Awesome. Well, without anything else to really walk through, I mean, I feel like I have such a strong inclination to want to go and just build fun, silly app hacks on my weekend for geofencing, that, whether it's just spinning up a dev box or just like having my auto pet feeder like feed when I get to a certain spot, like lots of fun, silly things. But, you mentioned before that there are lots of more serious commercial uses of this service. Are there any particular customers that you've worked with, or that the team has worked with, that are, seeing this value of Amazon Location Service for their customers?
Yeah, so we're hearing from PostNL that they're appreciating tracking to track package delivery infrastructure. Parcels and things like that get loaded into these things called roller cages, and they like to know where those are and also how full they are. And they've run a lot of existing infrastructure around this, and being able to say, we don't need to manage this anymore. We can just use Amazon Location and manage it for us. Has been really great for them. They've been appreciating that a lot.
I can imagine a scenario where there's some, if you've ever ordered a product on a retail site, maybe Amazon, maybe not, you have the check-in points of where the package has been confirmed. I imagine a scenario where there's a premium shipping option where I could pay to have a location tracker inside of what's being shipped, maybe. Maybe that's just my pie in the sky dream, right? But it's just a type of thing where if you look at it,
we'd love to know where our packages are and exactly when they're going to show up.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe I'm alone, but looking at the shipping status, I feel like it makes it arrive faster, but maybe I'm just the crazy one. So, yeah, who knows? But awesome. So, Seth, this has been a real pleasure. Sort of in conclusion here, is there anywhere that folks can go to get more information about Amazon Location Service? Any advice for getting started? I mean, you showed us diving right into the console with a really handy wizard, but are there any documents or resources that folks should look towards?
Yep. So we're going to paste some of those links into chat here if we haven't already. One of them, we've got some example code on GitHub that shows how to work with the different services. There are some developer guides within our documentation that walk how to work with different rendering engines. Those are great places to start. The landing page for the service itself, also a great place to start. And once you're within the AWS console, check the Explore page out. See what kind of crazy ideas it sparks.
Wonderful. Yeah. Again, another shout out to Esri in here. As you mentioned before, it seems like they were quite critical in the launch of this service in, again, providing that data that fundamentally backs the Amazon Location Service. So absolutely. A really, really wonderful call out, and thank you to them. And, I figured this is also a great time to sort of pitch that if you're building applications that may be contingent on data, check out the AWS Data Exchange and the broader partner network here at AWS, because there are lots of really great options to be able to access data, which may be undifferentiated heavy lifting for your business, right? You want access to that data, and you can do that through some sort of contractual and programmatic way without having to build all the infrastructure to do that and build that relationship with a partner. You can do that right through the marketplace and data exchange. So just another shout out there. But Seth, I'm sure this is just the beginning, right? A newly launched service. That's what we cover here. I'm sure there's lots that the location service team is cooking up that we probably can't talk about today. But if they have any questions, any feature requests, how would you suggest they reach out to the team to pass those along?
So talk to your local support rep, your account manager, or the AWS forums.
Wonderful. Well, that is unfortunately all of the time that we have today.